Salam. My name is Muhammad Laik Siddiqui, the father of Holophase. Part 56 Auditability Inspecting the Phi Pattern Claim Path for Hidden Structure. We began with pattern itself. What can be compared? What stays the same through change? The fourfold identity gave us the bones. A pattern is itself across transformations, and we can prove it publicly. We learned to measure without smuggling time, to remember without storing the past, to model without confusing map and territory. Part 51 built the firewall between layers. Part 51.5 protected the past from future rewriting. Part 52 reframed error as diagnostic signal. Part 53 taught us to correct while preserving lineage. Part 53.5 gave us a taxonomy of failure. Part 54 taught us that uncertainty is the shape of finite access. Part 54.3 distinguished kinds of not knowing. Part 54.5 showed us that instruments drift and must be calibrated. Part 55 taught us that claims must be replayable. Now we go deeper. Replayability is not enough. The problem we now face, the reproducible lie. Imagine a machine that produces perfect forgeries of famous paintings. The forgeries are so good that even experts cannot tell them from the originals. They are reproducible. You can run the machine again and again, and each time it produces the same convincing fake. If you only check for reproducibility, the forgeries pass the test. They are replayable. You can retrace the path from inputs to outputs and get the same result every time. But they are still fakes. The path itself is corrupt. This is the problem of auditability. Replayability tells us that a path can be retraced. It ensures that if we follow the same steps, we get the same outcome. But it does not tell us whether those steps were honest. It does not reveal whether the path itself was designed to produce a desired result, whether choices were made to hide what didn't fit, whether data was selected to support a conclusion rather than test it. A claim can be perfectly replayable and perfectly false. Auditability goes deeper. It inspects the path itself for hidden choices that shaped the outcome. It asks not just, can we do it again, but was it done right the first time? Auditability is how we tell the difference between a genuine discovery and a reproducible lie. What auditability really is. Auditability is often confused with replayability. People think that if a result can be reproduced, it must be trustworthy. But in pattern science, auditability is distinct and deeper. Auditability is the inspection of the claim pathway itself to detect hidden choices that shaped the outcome. Replay checks if a path can be retraced. Audit checks if that path was honest. Think of it like a financial audit. A company can produce the same numbers year after year, perfectly reproducible. But if those numbers come from creative accounting, hidden debts, and undisclosed transactions, the reproducibility doesn't matter. The numbers are still lies. An audit looks behind the numbers at the choices that produce them. Scientific auditability does the same. It looks at what data was selected and what was excluded, what boundaries were drawn and where, what transformations were applied and why, what decisions were made when things went wrong, what interpretations were imposed and by what criteria, whether the lineage is consistent and traceable. These are the places where honesty or corruption live. Replayability alone cannot see them. An everyday analogy, the cooking show. Imagine watching a cooking demonstration. The chef places ingredients on the table, mixes them, bakes them, and produces a beautiful loaf of bread. The recipe is printed, the steps can be replayed, and others can repeat the process. But now imagine that before the demonstration began, the chef quietly pre-fermented the dough for 12 hours, sifted the flour in a special way, or swapped one ingredient for another without telling anyone. The visible path is replayable, but it is incomplete. The result depends on hidden shaping. Anyone who follows only the public steps will not obtain the same loaf, or will obtain it under a false understanding of why it worked. This is the difference between replay and audit. Replay asks whether the steps can be followed again. Audit asks whether the steps shown were actually the steps that mattered. Science faces this problem constantly. A graph may be reproducible, but was the smoothing legitimate? A model may rerun correctly, but were exclusions hidden? A result may replicate on the shared dataset, but was the dataset already shaped in opaque ways? Auditability exists to answer those questions. Another analogy, the detective and the confession. Imagine a detective investigating a crime. They bring in a suspect, question them for hours, and eventually obtain a confession. The confession is detailed, consistent, and reproducible. The suspect tells the same story every time. Replayability is satisfied. The path from questioning to confession can be retraced. But was the confession honest? An audit would ask different questions. Were there threats? Were there promises? Was the suspect deprived of sleep? Was the questioning designed to produce a confession regardless of guilt? Were alternative explanations suppressed? These are the hidden choices that could have shaped the outcome. A confession can be reproducible and false. Scientific claims are the same. They can be reproducible and false. Auditability is how we check. What audit inspects? The hidden architecture of choice. Let us walk through the domains that auditability must examine. Selections. What data was chosen to be included? What were the criteria? Were they decided before seeing the data or after? Selection is one of the most powerful ways to shape an outcome. If you only include cases that support your conclusion, you can make any claim appear true. Excisions. What was cut out? What outliers were removed? What edge cases were discarded? Excisions can hide disconfirming evidence. They can make noise disappear and order appear. Boundaries. Where were the edges drawn? What temporal limits? What spatial boundaries? What population definitions? Boundaries determine what counts as inside and outside. Shift the boundary, shift the result. Transformations. What was done to the data? What normalizations? What corrections? What filters? Transformations can amplify some features and suppress others. They can create patterns that weren't there. Canonicalizations. What standards were used? What reference frames? What formats? Canonicalization choices can embed assumptions that shape outcomes. Different spellings normalized to one spelling, different image sizes rescaled to one size. These choices can hide meaningful variation. Fallback decisions. What happened when something went wrong? When an instrument malfunctioned? When data was missing? When a protocol failed? Fallback decisions are often undocumented but can profoundly affect results. A pipeline that silently replaces missing data with averages can create smoothness. Interpretations. What meanings were assigned? What symbols were used? What interpretive frameworks? Interpretation is where pattern becomes claim, and it is full of choice. A structurally identical trace may produce different public claims depending on the mapping layer. Provenance consistency. Does the lineage hold together? Do the inputs match the outputs? Are there gaps where things could have been inserted or removed without detection? Each of these is a potential site of hidden shaping. Each can be used to manufacture a parent pattern, and each is invisible to replayability alone. 6. Why hidden choices matter. Human inquiry is full of choices. Some are necessary and honest, some are careless, some are biased, some are invisible because they feel like standard practice. These choices matter because choices shape outcomes. Choose one dataset and not another, and the pattern may shift. Exclude a cluster of points, and a trend may appear smoother. Normalize one way instead of another, and a signal may look stronger. Cut off a time window early, and instability may disappear. Use one canonical form, and apparent similarity may increase. The problem is not that choices exist. Choices always exist. The problem is when choices are hidden. A mature science does not fantasize that no shaping occurs. It makes shaping visible. Auditability is the discipline that forces that visibility. 7. Hidden choices can fabricate patterns. Let us be explicit about what hidden choices can do. Create fake invariants. By selecting only data that shows a pattern, you can make a random process look lawful. By excluding cases that break the pattern, you can make a coincidence look like a law. Erase real patterns. By smoothing, filtering, or normalizing in certain ways, you can remove genuine structure. By choosing boundaries that cut through real patterns, you can make them disappear. Manufacture apparent order. By transforming data, you can create correlations that aren't really there. By canonicalizing in a certain way, you can make different things look the same. Conceal genuine irregularity. By excising outliers, you can hide the fact that the pattern is not as clean as claimed. By making fallback decisions that favor regularity, you can suppress disconfirming evidence. Produce false certainty. By making choices that narrow uncertainty bounds artificially, you can make a claim look more certain than it really is. These are not just theoretical possibilities, they happen. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes through unconscious bias, sometimes through standard practices that hide their own assumptions. Auditability is the only way to detect them. An example across scales. Let us see auditability at work across different scales of reality. At the quantum scale, a physicist claims a new particle. The experiment is replayable, but an audit asks, how were events selected? Were certain energy ranges excluded? Were calibration adjustments applied after seeing the data? These choices could manufacture a discovery from noise. At the biological scale, a biologist claims a gene-disease link. The analysis is replayable, but an audit asks, how were patient cohorts defined? Were certain subgroups excluded? How were genetic variants called? These choices could create a false association. At the medical scale, a clinical trial claims a treatment works. The statistics are replayable, but an audit asks, how were endpoints chosen? How was missing data handled? Were subgroup analyses performed post hoc? These choices can make an ineffective treatment look effective. At the climate scale, a climate model predicts warming. The runs are replayable, but an audit asks, what parameter choices were made? Were model versions selected based on fit in ways that overfit? These choices can make projections more certain than warranted. At the personal scale, a friend tells a story about the past. The story is consistent every time, but an audit asks, were uncomfortable details omitted? Was the story rehearsed until it felt true? Memory itself is full of hidden choices. Why replayability alone is not enough. A community that only values replayability is vulnerable. It can be fooled by consistent corruption. It can celebrate reproducible falsehoods. It can build entire fields on results that are repeatable but wrong. Replayability is necessary. It is the first line of defense, but it is not sufficient. Auditability is the second line. It asks the harder questions. It looks at the choices, not just the outcomes. It inspects the path, not just the destination. Think of it like building a bridge. Replayability ensures that if you follow the same plans, you get the same bridge. Auditability ensures the plans themselves are sound, that the materials are right, the calculations correct, the assumptions valid. Both are needed. Neither alone is enough. Auditability as scientific care. Auditability is often seen as bureaucracy, extra work, paperwork, slowing down progress. This view is dangerous. Auditability is not bureaucracy, it is scientific care. It is the discipline of transparency. It is the practice of making visible what could otherwise be hidden. It is the commitment to letting others see not just what we found, but how we found it and what choices we made along the way. A gardener cares not only whether a plant grew, but whether the soil, water, and light conditions were what they seemed. A musician tuning an instrument is not doing bureaucracy. They are caring for the conditions of truthful sound. A surgeon checking sterility is not doing decorative ritual. They are protecting reality contact. Audit in science is like that. It is the discipline of transparency. It says, if we are going to call this a public pattern, let us make sure the path was honestly shaped. 11. The replay versus audit distinction. Let us state the difference with maximum clarity. Replay asks, can the path be retraced? Audit asks, was the path itself lawfully and transparently shaped? Replay is outcome path reconstructability. Audit is pathway integrity inspection. Replay is necessary because without it, claims remain private. Audit is necessary because without it, replay can reproduce corruption. Replay without audit can still preserve hidden bias. Audit without replay cannot fully test operational retracing. Together, they form a deeper foundation for public science. Auditability and anti-smuggling. Auditability is one of the strongest allies of anti-smuggling. Anti-smuggling tells us not to hide assumptions. Auditability gives us a procedure for inspecting where hidden shaping may have entered anyway. This is especially important because many forms of smuggling are not dramatic. They live in defaults, conventions, routines, and everyone knows shortcuts. A dataset cleaned the usual way. A text normalized the standard way. A code pipeline run with default settings. A lab threshold chosen because that is common practice. Such phrases are often signals that audit is needed. Not because standard practice is always wrong, but because standard is not a substitute for visibility. Auditability, therefore, extends anti-smuggling from rule to inspection. A bridge analogy. Imagine a bridge over a river. Replayability is like driving across the bridge again to show that passage is possible. Auditability is like inspecting the bridge's bolts, materials, load assumptions, welds, maintenance history, design changes, stress tolerances, and hidden repairs. A bridge may still carry cars for a time, even if hidden weaknesses exist. Driving across it once more does not settle whether it was honestly or safely built. Inspection is needed. Science is like that. A claim may still work when replayed. Audit asks whether its hidden joints were lawful. That is the care by which public knowledge becomes worthy of long trust. The auditability principle. Let us state the principle clearly. Auditability is how public science checks whether a claimed pattern survived honest processing rather than hidden shaping. A claim that cannot be audited is not fully trustworthy. In simpler form, replay shows that a path can be rewalked. Audit shows that the path itself was honestly built. Or even shorter, show your choices. This principle is foundational because it addresses what replayability cannot. It looks behind the outcome at the process. It asks not just, can you do it again, but did you do it right? What auditability requires? A claim that aspires to public trust must be auditable. This means it must include, where material, selection policies and rationale, excision records and justifications, boundary assumptions and their basis, transformation logs with parameters, canonicalization specifications, fallback decision protocols, interpretation maps and frameworks, provenance consistency evidence. This is not bureaucracy. This is the infrastructure of trust. Without it, we cannot know whether a pattern is real or manufactured. The auditability gate. Because auditability is so central, it needs its own gate. Auditability certification. Any public claim must declare, where material, selection policies and rationale, excision records and justifications, boundary assumptions and their basis, transformation logs with parameters, canonicalization specifications, fallback decision protocols, interpretation maps and frameworks, provenance consistency evidence. This gate ensures that choices are visible, not hidden. It makes auditability a requirement, not an option. What we refuse. With auditability as a core requirement, we have clear grounds for refusal. We refuse any claim that lacks auditability where material, hides selection policies, fails to record excisions, leaves transformations opaque, declares canonicalization without specification, omits fallback decisions, has inconsistent provenance, treats audit as optional, conflates replay with audit, assumes honesty without auditability. Each refusal protects the integrity of public science. Auditability in ordinary life. This principle is not limited to laboratories. Suppose a family hears that one child always leaves the kitchen messy. If they replay the claim, they might inspect the kitchen repeatedly and see mess after that child cooks. But auditability would ask deeper questions. Who notices the mess? What counts as messy? Are all children held to the same standard? Was some mess cleaned before observation? Were some cases remembered more vividly than others? This is a small-scale social example of hidden shaping. Replayability alone would say, yes, the pattern can be observed again. Auditability says, inspect the path by which the pattern was constituted as a claim. This does not weaken truth, it protects it. The deeper meaning, audit as respect. There is something profound about auditability that goes beyond technique. Audit is respect for the community. It says, I trust you enough to show you not just my results, but my process. I trust you enough to let you see my choices, my doubts, my decisions. Audit is respect for truth. It says, I am not hiding anything. The path is open. Examine it. Audit is respect for the future. It says, years from now, when methods have changed and assumptions have shifted, others can still understand what I did and why. A science without auditability is a science that asks for trust without offering transparency. It is a science that says, trust me, rather than see for yourself. We are building a different kind of science, one that offers not just results, but reasons, not just conclusions, but choices. Handoff to what comes next. With replayability and auditability established, we have built the infrastructure for public, checkable science. Claims can be retraced, Paths can be inspected. But there is one more condition for a claim to be truly scientific. It must be falsifiable. A claim that cannot be proven wrong is not a scientific claim. It is a belief, a doctrine, a dogma, but not science. Falsifiability is the risk that a claim takes. It is the willingness to say, here is what would show I am wrong. Here is the evidence that would disprove me. That is where we go next. Part 57, Falsifiability, will give us the tools to ensure that claims are not just replayable and auditable, but genuinely testable. Because a claim that cannot be tested is not science. It is something else. Closing meditation. We have added another layer to our growing science. We learned that replayability is not enough. A claim can be reproducible and false. We learned that auditability inspects the path itself for hidden choices that could shape outcomes. We learned what audit must examine: selections, excisions, boundaries, transformations, canonicalizations, fallback decisions, interpretations, provenance consistency. We learned that hidden choices can fabricate patterns, create fake invariants, erase real structure, manufacture order, conceal irregularity, produce false certainty. We learned that auditability is not bureaucracy, but scientific care. It is the discipline of transparency, the practice of making choices visible. We learned that auditability is respect for community, for truth, for the future. A science that audits its claims is a science that can be trusted. A science that hides its choices is a science that asks for faith. We are building a science that can be trusted. Now we go deeper still, into falsifiability, the willingness to be wrong. Because a claim that cannot be tested is not science, it is something else, and we need to know the difference. Always, peace be upon you.